Tonight's event is Last Lecture. The theme of this year's Autumn in Adams is Everyone Has a Story to Tell. And we heard on Monday night, author Laura Pritchard came and talked about how stories help us make sense of the bigger questions in life and can deepen our relationships with one another. When shared, our stories break open our humanity and can draw us closer to one another. It's not always easy to tell our stories, but sometimes a circumstance will open up a space where we can do that. And we're hoping that tonight we can open up that kind of a space. So we're asking you to imagine that you knew that you had one final opportunity to be with someone that you care about, a family member, a friend, or even a group like a class. So this is your last opportunity to be with them. And how would you spend that time? And what would you say? So we have invited two Adams State College professors selected by the students to do just that. They have been invited to talk on any subject of their choosing, imagining that all of you here tonight are here to come and listen to their last lecture. And each speaker will have 45 minutes to talk, and then a 10-minute break in between the speakers. And first we present Dr. John Taylor, Professor of Theater. At Adams State, Dr. Taylor directed the Laramie Project, A Doll's House, A Christmas Carol, and Children of a Lesser God. In 2006, he directed Dead Man Walking as part of the National Dead Man Walking Theater Project. With a grant from the National Endowment for the Arts Big Read program, Dr. Taylor organized and directed the ASU Fahrenheit 451 project in 2007 and 2008. He has been recognized by the Associated Students and Faculty, or ASNF, here on campus for excellence in academic advising in 2004. He received the ASNF Recognition Award for Excellence in Student Engagement in 2009. And also in 2009, Dr. Taylor was awarded the ASU Presidential Teacher Award for Outstanding Teaching. He is currently preparing the Romeo and Juliet Project, a community-wide project which will examine conflict in society and include a production of Romeo and Juliet. His title tonight for his last lecture is Acting Heroic, Lessons from a Life in the Theater.
Thank you all for being here. All right, the year is 1970. The place is Wilson Elementary School, located in a working-class neighborhood of Wichita, Kansas, known as South City. I'm 5 years old and a kindergartner. And I don't know it at the time, but my life is about to change forever. I'm John Taylor, and the title of my last lecture is Acting Heroic, Lessons from a Life in the Theater. And tonight I'm going to share with you the three big picture ideas that I've learned as a student and a teacher while living a life in the theater. So back to that classroom, 1970, something happened in that classroom that led to the first big picture idea that I learned in life. First year kindergarten teacher, I still remember clearly, Mrs. Conyers, decided that she wanted to direct and produce a Christmas play with her kindergarten class. Now this was 1970, remember, so it wasn't just a generic Christmas play. We were going to do the Christmas play. I wanted to be Joseph. I really wanted to be Joseph. I was told I was too short to be Joseph. So instead, I was cast in the pivotal role of the Star of Bethlehem, which involved a dowel rod, construction paper, and a lot of glitter. So we rehearsed our play for a couple of weeks, and then on the day of the performance, we transformed our classroom into a theater. We moved all the desks to the side of the room. We established the stage at the front of the classroom, in front of the chalkboard. We made the middle of the room the audience space, and throughout the day, different classes made their way in to see our production of The Birth of Christ. Well, the first group in were the sixth graders. And they filed into the classroom and they filled the middle of the room where our desks used to be. The action of the play took place in front of the chalkboard at the front of the class, so you're where the sixth graders are, and I waited my entrance at the back of the classroom, waiting to come in as the Star of Beth, carrying my stick. That's basically what I did. And so as the play began, all of a sudden it occurred to me that we have a problem here, one that we didn't anticipate and one that we didn't rehearse. Because as I looked at my fellow actors up in front, I realized I was having trouble seeing them because there were a group of big sixth graders in my way. I wasn't sure how I was going to go from the back of the room and make it to the stage. We hadn't rehearsed that part with an audience involved, with an audience there in the middle. And all of a sudden I heard my cue. And I had to start moving. So I have my stick in hand and I'm moving it closer and closer to the back of the sixth grade class, not knowing how I was going to make my way through them. They were unaware that I was even there. And then finally I get to the back of the last row of sixth graders, standing there waiting to get to the stage somehow. And then a really cool thing happened. As if the sixth graders were the Red Sea themselves, they parted. And I walked through with that stick and star and glitter in hand. And I'll tell you, I didn't feel afraid. I wasn't nervous. I felt at home. I felt like I had found, even at the age of 5, where I belonged in this world. And I think strongly that that was the moment that I fell in love with theater. And then, of course, I went on to do other productions. The one right after that, there was a historical recreation of The Wedding of Tom Thumb. This time, my height worked for me. I was Tom Thumb, the lead role. And then I've spent the last 40 years involved in theater. And as I think back to that moment, what was it about that moment that so clicked for me, that I fell in love with theater, that on some level that I wasn't able to articulate at that time, that I had found what I wanted to do in life. And I never have really wavered. Ted, there was one moment when I started college that I thought theater wasn't important enough, and I signed on as a social work major. Then that lasted about a week, and then I realized that the theater was where I was supposed to be. So what was it about that moment? And as I think back upon it, I think in part it has to do with the way I look at theater and in fact the way that I define acting. And some of you who are in my acting class or were in my acting class will recognize this definition. That I argue that acting is really a sharing of energy. A sharing of energy between actors on stage, a sharing of energy between actors and audience. And this sharing goes on until a kind of electricity is created. Something you can't see, but you can feel as this connection between human beings occurs as we go on a mutual journey through a story for a couple of hours together. And as I walked through that crowd, those sixth graders, I don't know if anybody else felt, I felt it. I felt that sense of energy in the air, and I was addicted to it. And I wanted more of it, this sense of connection to other people and telling a story and sharing that story. So as I look at that moment, then I began to think of other things, big picture ideas. If theater is a metaphor for life, then I would argue also that life is a sharing of energy. And at some point, I hope that each of us in our lives ask the very basic question, how do I share energy? Do I give my energy freely and fully, sharing the best of myself? Or do I hold back and conserve and withdraw, fearing that the more I share with other people, the less I'll have for myself? Not realizing that the more we share the best of ourselves with others, the more we'll get back in turn and the more energy we will have for ourselves. Or in worst case situations, do we choose to share the worst of ourselves? Really, the choice is ours, and I think to a large degree, how we answer that question. How do we choose to share our energy? The best of ourselves or the worst of ourselves will determine to a large degree the kind of life we end up leading. So out of that classroom, I not only found a love for theater, but I learned my first big picture lesson. Life is a sharing of energy, and how we choose to share who we are with others and with what we're doing will determine to a large degree the kind of life we lead. So I went from there, continued to do more theater, but along the way I found something that I loved even more, and that was the idea of teaching. So I enrolled at Wichita State University in Wichita, Kansas, as a theater secondary ed major. And in my first semester of my sophomore year, I'm convinced that I learned the most important thing I've ever learned in 11 years of college, from undergraduate through graduate school. It was a history and philosophy class of education, a history and philosophy of education class taught by a man named Dr. Lewis Goldman. And in this class one evening, Dr. Goldman talked and shared about the writer Homer. And he talked about Homer's heroic ideal, looking at Homer's stories. What made his characters heroic? And actually, it's a pretty good question to discuss, because if you read Homer's stories, his characters go on great adventures, they challenge the gods and all, but they don't always succeed. Sometimes and oftentimes they lose. So how can you be heroic if you've lost? Well, Dr. Goldman explained to us it is not winning that made them successful. It was the very fact that they faced their fears and challenged their limitations, sought to go beyond their own self-perceived limitations in life by setting off on a quest in which they knew not how it would end or whether they would be successful or not, but the very fact that they faced their fears and challenged their limitations and expanded their opportunities made them heroic. Now, on a personal level, I relate to this by thinking back to when we first moved to Alamosa. Our daughter, Kate, who's in the audience back there, and probably just hated that I just identified that she's in the audience, was 4 years old. And we went to City Park, and she wanted to climb the monkey bars. So I lifted her up. She hung on the first bar, reached for the second, reached for the third, and as she did that, she fell to her knees and scraped them up terribly. I mean, she was crying. It was an awful situation. We just went and got ice cream. Forget the monkey bars. That was the solution. But it took months before she was willing and ready to go back and try the monkey bars. So we went back to the park, the same place earlier where she fell and hurt herself. I lifted her up. She held on to the first bar, reached for the second, reached for the third, reached for the fourth, and as she went for the fifth, she fell. She dropped back on her feet. Now, on one level, you could argue that she didn't successfully complete crossing the monkey bars. But from a different perspective, I would argue that she was heroic in that moment, because she faced her fears without knowing whether or not she was going to be successful. And in making it, and just challenging herself, her limitations, her self-perceived limitations, facing her fears, she was heroic in that moment. And as Dr. Goldman explained, it's not just about one person being heroic, but as we watch somebody try something that they don't know if they can do or not, they face a fear, we are all made heroic by that moment. Because we think, if my daughter can do that, face her fear, what in my own life am I avoiding facing? Or if you think on a bigger scale, Neil Armstrong, the first man on the moon, no guarantee of success when he did that. But in doing it, he was successful, but he was also heroic. Not just because he did something that he was successful at doing, but because in that moment, he redefined what it is to be a human being. He redefined for all time what it is to be a human being. Once he did that, we are no longer limited to earth. What it means to be a human being and our possibilities are forever expanded by that moment in time. This lesson that we learned from Dr. Goldman changed forever how I think about success and failure. In life, in the classroom, in productions, in whatever I do, that success isn't always about winning. It's about seeking to go beyond what you thought you could do. In truth, I think that that's what teaching is really about. Daring our students to be heroic, to go beyond their fears and their self-perceived limitations and seek to expand the boundaries of their opportunities. Daring our students to be heroic. And when we do that, the possibilities are not only great for that person, but for all of us. It was an incredible lesson to learn from a very wise man, and it's a lesson that I teach when I teach my REAP class for people going into elementary school teaching. Success isn't about winning or losing ultimately. It's about striving to make yourself better than you are today. That's what I learned, and that was an important lesson. So I go through my education courses. I get to the student teaching semester of my student career, and I have an epiphany. I realize that I don't want to teach at the secondary level. So I don't. I don't even do the student teaching semester. I realize, particularly what I'm going into, theater, in an era, this would be in 1988. There were budget cuts, as there are budget cuts over and over again in the arts. It wasn't exactly a promising career to go into, and I realized that I would probably be happier teaching at the college level. So I apply to graduate schools, and I'm accepted at The Ohio State University, where I enroll and I pursue a master's degree and then a doctoral degree. And it's at Ohio State University that I learned my third big picture idea in life. And I learned it on the same day that's one of the 3 happiest days of my life. It's the day that I earned my doctoral degree, the graduation ceremony. I look at that day. I look at the day that Christine and I were married nearly 20 years ago this December, and I look at the day 15 and a half years ago when Kate was born as the 3 happiest days of my life. And there's one common denominator for each of those events, and that's Christine. And without her, anything that I've accomplished I wouldn't have, and without Christine and Kate, anything that I've accomplished wouldn't have been worth it. So thank you, Christine and Kate. So on that day at graduation, the big lesson I learned: Ohio State does things in a big way, always. Not only football is big, but graduation is big. I didn't graduate in the spring, which would have meant sitting out in the football stadium with thousands of people. I graduated in the summer with about 5,000 or 6,000 other people graduating. When you graduate at Ohio State, everybody crosses the stage and everybody receives their actual diploma as you cross the stage. That's a big feat to accomplish with that many people. It's all about precision and timing and everyone being where they're supposed to be. So picture this, graduation day, we're in the big basketball arena, Schottenstein Center, and I'm in my row with the other people getting their doctoral degrees, and there are literally hundreds of us. And our row, it's time for us to get up. We move towards the stage, but before we get to the stage, there's a wonderful little ceremony that happens. You move off from your group and you go and find your advisor, your mentor who's been working with you. And you find that mentor and you meet him or her and you get hooded. So the doctoral hood is the thing that we wear over our gowns, and that moment is the moment when you receive it. So I found my advisor, Dr. Alan Woods, the wisest man I've ever met in my life, and he has shown my family and I so many kindnesses through the years. I'm forever indebted to him. So I go to Alan, I shake his hand, I turn my back to him, he places the doctoral hood over me. I mean, this is an emotional moment. My family are in the stands, and as I'm getting the doctoral hood put over me, I'm waiting, anticipating when I turn back what he's going to say to me. This is a man I had known for 6 years, the words of wisdom. I mean, this is the wisest man I've known. I knew he was going to say something as he sends his student off into the world. I turn, shake hands, I wait, I look in his eyes, and what does he say? He says, "Get back in line or you'll screw everything up." So I laugh. I know he was right. We couldn't chat because if I was out of line, I was going to get the wrong diploma, somebody else, the whole domino effect would happen. So I get back in line, but later I choose to reimagine that moment in a different way. I think Alan was not really telling me that life is about following the rules and doing what people expect you to do or else you'll get in trouble and mess things up. I think instead what he was really saying to me was, be where you're supposed to be, doing what you're supposed to do, and everything will work out. And that was great advice actually for me as I began then after graduation to apply for teaching jobs. This was 1994 when I graduated with my doctoral degree. It was a tough market to graduate in. To find a job, particularly in theater and higher education, was hard. There was a whole generation of professors who had yet to retire. And we were waiting for them to retire, as well as the economy. Thank you, thank you, Ted. Young professors, thank you everywhere. I would send out applications, and I would get back letters saying 100 other people apply for this, or 200 other people applied for this one position. Luckily, something happened that was to my benefit while riding out a tough job market. I was hired to be the assistant to the director and curator of the Lawrence and Lee Theater Research Institute at Ohio State University. It's one of 3 or 4 archival theater research institutes in the country. I had a great position. I was working with my old mentor again, Dr. Woods. It was a great job. I met lots of famous people, from Baryshnikov to Twyla Tharp to Richard Lewis, the comedian. I handled Cab Calloway's costume that he wore in Porgy and Bess. I got to see private drawings from the great composer Harold Arland, who wrote Somewhere Over the Rainbow. I mean, it was just an incredible job. But along the way, I knew that it wasn't where I was supposed to be doing what I was supposed to do. I wasn't yet ready, and I'm still not ready, to be an administrator. I wanted to be and needed to be in the classroom, but there weren't the jobs coming. So I took a variety of jobs in the evening as an adjunct instructor, teaching at community colleges, because I wanted the experience. I wanted to learn how to be a better teacher. I applied and I applied. I was offered a job in Texas. I turned down the job in Texas because it was Texas. It wasn't just that. It didn't feel like the right place for me to be at the right time. That wasn't where I was supposed to be. And then in 1999, I applied for a job at a little place I'd never heard of called Adams State College. I remember actually sitting at my computer and thinking, I'm not going to do this. I'm just not going to do that. I thought, no, it's not going to happen, so I'm not going to apply. And but something told me apply. And I did, and I was interviewed, and I was brought out for an interview. I did a phone interview. I was brought out for an interview. Then I was offered the job, and I took it because it felt like this was where I was supposed to be, doing what I was supposed to do. And I'd said all along, from the very first day in graduate school, that my career goal was to teach in a smaller college where I could get to know my students, they could get to know me, and I could have an impact on their lives and hopefully an impact on the community. This was the job for me. Took it. So Christine and I and Kate, we packed up our stuff, moving from Columbus, Ohio, a city of 1 million+ people, to Alamosa, a city of 8,000. We rented a house sight unseen from a realtor, and it was a 4-bedroom house, like $465 a month. It was a great deal, 2-car garage. The realtor told me that it was on a cul-de-sac. It was in an area that was slightly commercial. So we pictured grass and kids playing, and our daughter was just 4 years old. Perfect environment. We finally get here. We finally find it. I'm driving in one car with the goldfish and the dogs. Christine's in the other car with Kate. And we finally find this place, and it turns out we find ourselves behind Kmart in one of those 2 houses located between Sears and what is now the Red Cross. Let me recreate that moment for you. We get out of the car. I'm thinking, oh my God, we're not going to stay, are we? And Christine gets out of the car, and her first words from her mouth were, "You've got to be kidding." I'm not sure whether there were tears or not, but we stayed. We lived in that house for a year until we found our own house that we bought. But we immediately made Alamosa our home. It felt like the right place to be and where we should be. The college felt like the right place and where we should be. And so as I took this job at Adams, I promised myself that I wouldn't miss an opportunity. This I've been waiting. I graduated with my doctoral degree in 1994. This was 1999. It was about 4.5 years that I was patient. I had people telling me, get your Master of Library Sciences degree so you can be faculty at Ohio State with your job at the Research Institute. Go teach high school. But I knew that if I just waited to know where I was supposed to be, doing what I was supposed to be, it would work out. And I promised myself I had waited this long that I wasn't going to hold back when I got here. I was going to try to be the kind of teacher that I had dreamed of being and do the things that I wanted to do in the ways that I wanted to do them. And I also promised myself this, or I told myself this, that I was 34 years old. I have 30 years to teach at least. At that time I thought 30 years is not going to be enough. And I worried about it not being long enough. But I said I have 30 years and that will be my sign of success. That will be my standard of success as a teacher. 3 decades of impacting students' lives who then would go on in their own jobs and careers and lives and impact others. That would be my legacy. That would be my legacy, would be longevity. 30 years if I was lucky enough that they retained me and I got tenure, this would be my sign of success. And as we went along, things were going well. I'm tenured, I got full professor. In 2006, I directed It's a Wonderful Life as our holiday production that year. And I remember thinking, Sandy Weehee gave me a sign that said, It's a Wonderful Life, and I have it in my house, now in my office. I remember looking at that sign thinking, it really is a wonderful life. And then the split second later, I thought, be careful. Be careful. You never know what's going to happen next. One of my favorite words, my favorite word actually of all time, is the word aporia, A-P-O-R-I-A. It's a Greek word. It means gap or contradiction. I use it a lot in my dramatic literature courses. I talk about moments of aporia, and this is how I define it. A moment of aporia is when what we believe to be true is contradicted by what we've seen or what we experience. I hope that most theater performances are moments of aporia for our audience. I think life is full of moments of aporia for us, that what we believe to be true runs smack dab into, is contradicted by something we see or something we experience. And then somehow we have to reconcile what we once knew to be true and what we've now just experienced. In 2007, I experienced a major moment of aporia that would change my life forever. Let me get a drink. In 2007, in February, I woke up one morning, and it was as if my body was split in half. The right side felt like it had a heating pad on it. The left side felt like an ice pack was on it, from foot to head. I got to tell you, sitting down, it was a weird experience. And that went on for days, and so I finally saw my doctor and was diagnosed with a pinched nerve. And I thought, okay, that's fine, we'll just ride it out. And it started to get better. Then a month later, in March of 2007, I woke up, and my feet felt like they were asleep, only it didn't go away. It just didn't go away. And then a couple of days later, that feeling of being numb or tingling or asleep moved up to here, and then gradually, by the time that I walked in graduation in May of 2007, that my whole body from my feet to here felt like it was asleep. And so my doctor sent me to see a neurologist, Dr. Patrick Sternberg, and I was diagnosed with multiple sclerosis, MS. In that drive back from Dr. Sternberg's office in Levita, Christine and I pulled over to the side of the road going across the Levita Pass. We looked at each other. We cried for a little bit. We worried about my health. We worried about the health of our family. I worried about my ability to continue to teach. I'm not the smartest professor out there, but the one thing I feel like I bring to the classroom is a sense of energy and enthusiasm and passion. At that time, I had very little feeling in my body, and my energy was completely gone. And I remember telling Christine, if this doesn't change, I don't know how I can continue to teach. And it concerned me that I wouldn't be able to be the kind of teacher I promised myself that I wanted to be. Luckily for us, luckily for me, in fact, with the Fahrenheit 451 project was coming along. I was planning it, getting ready to implement it, It was one of the most important moments in my professional career, one of the most exciting moments that year when we did that project from October 2007 till May 2008. And I'm thankful for that moment because it kept me preoccupied, not worrying about this thing that I was dealing with. But on a personal level, it was probably the most difficult year that I've ever experienced. I would go through moments of exacerbations, which made movement at times difficult to do. I finally told my theater students, because I didn't want them to think that I was drinking before I came to class, but I was dealing with it, and the Fahrenheit Project kept me focused on something really, really positive. And then in March of 2008, as I was in rehearsals for Fahrenheit 451, our stage production, I woke up one Sunday night with an excruciating pain in my left eye, so bad that if I could have taken out my eye, I would have done that. I went finally to the emergency room, and I'm very grateful for Dr. Sternberg letting me call him at 5 in the morning, and we got the pain stopped. But then I was re-diagnosed based upon those new symptoms. What I got for literature to read about this was no longer MS, but something known as neuromyelitis optica, or NMO, or Devick's disease. And what the material, which there's not a lot out there, there's getting more and more. It says it's a rare, life-threatening, inflammatory, demyelinating disorder, usually relapsing, that targets the optic nerves and spinal cord, resulting in attack-related accrual of disability. Compared with typical multiple sclerosis, NMO is more rapidly disabling. 50% of patients must use a wheelchair, and 62% become functionally blind at 5 years. Now, some of those statistics are changing because there are starting to be some new ways of dealing with it, but you've got to understand this was a devastating diagnosis. And I had to figure out where I go from here. I mean, I had set as one standard for my success as longevity. And it really occurred to me that maybe longevity wasn't in the cards for me. Maybe it is, maybe, I mean, we all don't know how long we have, but sometimes we get, a concrete reminder that we don't always have longevity. So if I set longevity as the standard for my success, what if that doesn't happen? Do I look back and say, I wasn't success? And so I realized at that moment it was time for the teacher to go back and see what kind of student I was. Did I really learn those 3 big picture ideas, and could I actually apply them? So as I went through this process of dealing with this, I tried to figure out, for me, what is on a professional level success? And I looked back to those 3 big ideas. And this is what I came up with. My success will be based upon being where I'm supposed to be, doing what I'm supposed to do, which I believe strongly it's here. As long as you'll have me, I will be here working in the theater and trying to bring quality productions and quality work in the classroom. It will also mean sharing fully my energy, giving the best of myself for as long as I can. And I think that'll be a long time. And it means dealing with and facing whatever challenges and limitations come my way. Those will be my successes, defining on my terms my success. I hope you will remember these 3 big picture ideas and find them useful. Be where you're supposed to be, doing what you're supposed to do. And only your heart and mind can tell you what that's going to be. And as you're doing what you're supposed to do, share your energy fully, giving the best of yourself to the people around you and to what you're doing. And as you face challenges, and you will, and as obstacles get in your way, and they will, and as life brings you the unexpected, and it will, choose your own success. Define your own success by seeking to confront your limitations, face your fears, and expand the boundaries of your opportunities. If you do these things, I believe that you'll be able to look back at your life and say, I was successful, and moreover, I was heroic. Thank you so much for listening. Lecture over.